Hey, loves, it's Dr. Simone Ellis, and I have a special treat for you today. We are going to be speaking to an amazing leadership coach who's going to talk to us about really fostering a great work environment and team culture. I have the pleasure of speaking to Lisa Rigoli. Thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the invite. I'm really excited to dive into this specific topic, and I'm just excited for you and I to have a moment to chat about it.
I know, because like this is such a hot topic, especially post pandemic, right? Like, I don't know about you, but the workplace is crazy, and I am needing some tips. So I'm actually excited to dive deep because I'm like, girl, teach me the tips. Like, what do I need to do to get my team to be inspired, a great workplace? How do I even get people wanting to show up to work when Etsy is big business, Amazon is big business? Like, people don't, we're gonna make candles now. I don't gotta go to work. I gotta make a candle so I can make my online business roll. And I'm like, does everybody make candles? So I'm super excited, right? At least that's what I'm thinking in my head. I'm like, this candle business must be popping on Etsy, for real, for real. So thank you so much for your time today. Before we get started, I want people to know a little bit about you. So tell me, like, where did you grow up? Who are you? And how did you actually get into the leadership space?
Yeah, so I'm a first generation Jamaican American, and my parents picked South Florida to start and raise their family. I share this because it's a very interesting dynamic to be raised in such a rich Jamaican household, and they picked the most non-diverse city to raise their family in. But it's all good. It's all good.
What part of South Florida are you in? Where were you
I'm in Boca Raton, so if that gives you any context, yeah.
Yeah.
Boca is predominantly a Jewish retirement community.
Yes.
So my parents, I would always joke with them. I'm like, how'd you pick Boca? And it just had better schools. So I'm grateful for what they did, because that's where I was going to go with it. The trajectory to my education. I got to live in Atlanta for a little bit. I got to live in Colorado. I got to live a bunch of different places because of education. And a lot of my background was in psychology. I really loved interacting with how people think and how people behave and things of that nature. So I fell into HR very comfortably because I just wanted to connect with people.
Yeah.
So over the last 16 years, I've had the opportunity to work for companies like Target, CarMax, and just most recently a company called DaVita, which is centered around kidney dialysis. And what allowed me to shift into what I'm doing today is that the end of last year, I went through a major career shift. DaVita went through a reorg, and as a result, my role as an HR director was eliminated.
Wow.
No lie, Dr. Simone's 16 years of HR leadership like flashed right before my eyes as I was in this moment of, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? So option one was to explore another role within the organization, or option two was to bet on myself. Because for 6 of those 16 years, I had my own coaching practice. So I thought this was a sign from the Lord to be like, trust this.
Yeah,
This
bet on you.
And that's what happened. So I'm happy to say that I'm a full-time leadership coach and HR consultant, working with leaders and teams that are navigating through their own type of, I'm calling it a shift, some type of transition. And how do they build that cohesive team in a time where people are making candles on Etsy and they don't want to.
I don't want any more candles. So that was a big pivot, because now something that you've been doing for 16 years, all of a sudden you had to make that pivot. And walk me through that process. I mean, like, I'm assuming that you have a family. Like, what was the conversation that was going on there? What was your mindset when you were literally saying, where am I supposed to go next?
I appreciate you asking that, because I think a lot of people, when they hear my story, they think that the reorg happened and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go full time in my business. But what was unique in nature in this role is that my boss had left the organization about a week before I found out my role was eliminated. So by default, I stepped up a level to basically oversee this reorg.
Yeah.
And I had to navigate 3,000 teammates in figuring out where they're going to either be replaced or how I would separate them out of the company. So for 2.5 months, it was a lot of grief therapy, of the denial, the anger, the frustration, all the things, because I just couldn't make sense of it. And one of the things that really helped me to get to this point is I'm very lucky. My husband, which is also another key fact about Boca, I've known him since middle school. My husband
What?
would really ground me in. Every night we would really focus on gratitude. What are the things that are happening in my life at that moment that I could actually just look at and just be grateful for? And it was in those moments that I realized, you know what? All of these things are happening for the right reason. Let me just bet on myself. My husband's going to support me, and let's just see what happens. And one of the greatest things from this that came out of it, Davita kept me on as their executive coach. So even though I left them, I still stayed on and had my first client that way, like first larger client, I should say.
Wow. And I think about when people are concerned about changing jobs or pivoting out of a position, you were like thrusted into that. But instead of staying in a place that was low, which is like, oh my God, I'm depressed. I don't know what's going to happen next. How am I going to eat? Because that's, essentially you're like, how are we going to eat? You know, you were like, no, let me
Huh?
just continue to go the journey that I was already going on and continue to move forward. So congratulations on that. That has got to be a really, really big step in for you. And I mean, I'm really proud, like seriously proud of that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's talk a little bit about team and culture because I don't know about you, and I know my listeners probably feel the same way, especially in the dental industry right now. It's wild. We are really, really trying to fight and find people who really, really want to be healthcare providers. And the job is stressful, but I don't think that that's just dentistry. It's like across the board. I see help wanted signs, help wanted signs. So the first question I ask you is that what is team cohesion? How do we create an actual team that we can get for people to stay?
So you're going to hear me reference Patrick Lencioni's five dysfunctions of a team pretty often. That is a model that I have lived by for the last 10 plus years. And the reason why I hone in on this specific model is because at the key root of the foundation of building a cohesive team is trust. We work in such a wild time that I know this may be not happening in your space, but I think in a lot of other spaces we're not loyal to each other. There is not this trust factor. There's this feeling of I'm replaceable at any given time, or I can look for the next available thing at any given time. And until we can define what trust looks like within our four walls, within our team, we won't be able to retain our team until we really establish what does trust mean to us.
And how do you define that? Because especially in a time where it feels like you really can't trust anybody, how do we start that?
Yeah, I think there's two different types of trust. There's predictive trust where we can predict based on people's behaviors how they're going to show up. And then there's vulnerability-based trust. Vulnerability-based trust is when we as leaders, even ourselves, are able to raise our hand and say, I made a mistake, or I need help, or I'm sorry. And in order to be able to say things like that within our team, we have to be able to be vulnerable to share things about who we are and why we show up to work the way we do. I actually share very often about my heritage. I share very often that I also grew up in a very non-diverse city. Why? Because that makes me who I am. It's how I operate and how I show up and how things come out of my mouth. So I do that to build trust with people so that way they can see we actually have a lot more similarities than we do have differences. But it all starts with how are we able to just connect with our team on a deeper level, since we spend more time with the people we work
Oh
with than
my
we do
God.
sometimes our family.
I say that all the time to my team, especially like for myself. Like one of the reasons why I feel like right now the team that I have is so wonderful. They're so great. And the reason why I feel that way is that they actually see me and I see them. So I'm a ball of energy when I walk in that office. They're like, uh oh, here she comes. And I'm like, all right, let's go. Because that's just who I that is truly who I am as a human, right? And I'm asking, how was your weekend? Like, tell me about it. Like, and I really want to know about them. And what I've realized over the time, because some of my struggles have been as being an owner and being a woman and being young, because I started my dental practice at 26. I came out of school at Denny 25, right, girl? Like that's okay. The stress was real. So starting so early, I didn't know how to be a leader, nor did I know how to say, okay, I want to say like I was torn between how much information do I share about myself and how much is too much, right? How much do I know about my team and how much is too much information about them, because I'm an empath. So I naturally am like, oh, you're going through this at home? I get why you can't come to work. But then on the other extreme, I'm like, by me sending you home, right? Because I understood what you were going through. Now my team is struggling. So then I would be like, okay, nope, I don't care what you're going through. I don't want to hear it. You got to come to work because these people are going to be struggling. And then I felt like there was more tension. So one of my quick first questions I'm thinking of is like, okay, how do you know how much to share? Because you did just tell me that you're from, your parents were immigrants, and you did just tell me that you grew up in a non-diverse area. So is that enough? Is that enough to keep that team cohesive for trust, or should I be sharing more?
What's great about this question is it's all about really getting to know your team and yourself, meaning whatever you feel comfortable, and whoever's listening, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, that's enough. But it's for your team to be able to understand that you are putting yourself out there in your own unique way. That's part one. And then the other part is, how are you communicating what your expectations are with that trust? Let me use the example that you just provided. So ultimately, if you feel comfortable right now sharing with the team how you want to make sure you spend time with your family, and it's really important that if anyone is sick, that you're going to be home, then you're setting this expectation that, hey, team, I want you to take care of your family. But then there's an and I want to make sure that we treat everyone in this dental team as a family and as a unit, knowing that every time you're not here, the team has to pick up extra workload. So how do you talk about that in a way of, we're so grateful that Lisa was able to take care of her family, but I'm also so grateful that Dr. Simone was able to step up and pick up that workload, but it was stressful. So what do we need to do to continue to keep the momentum going? So that way you are free to take your time, but not excessively. Is that resonating?
Oh, I love that. I think that that's a great place to like be vulnerable, say, hey, I really want to have a personal life. Like that's important to me. And when my family is not okay or when I'm not okay, I'm going to take the time off. But then in the same breath, I want to make sure that guys, hey, when that happens, I know what the workload is going to be like for you. So I'm not going to take advantage of that. I love that. And I think that I hope more doctors are hearing that and saying like, guys, you can be expressive to your team and let them know like kind of how you're human too. Like I always tell my team, I don't care what your role is, from the cleaning lady all the way down to the highest surgeon. We are all the same. I cannot do my job if you don't do your job. And so that's where we are all in the same. So if I don't show up for work, none of you guys can do your jobs. And if you don't show up for work, it's going to make my job super hard. So I love that, Lisa. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I want to just even share a more relatable scenario, because I think I know sometimes people hear that. They're like, is it though that easy? Is it? And the short answer is yes. Anyone that has a partner, doesn't matter if you're married with a partner, just a partner in general, someone that you know that you have a relationship with, we know the power of communication. That partner cannot, they can't figure out what's going on in our brain.
Right.
Let me give you like an example would be, my husband, I love him to death. He's down the hall, so he's probably going to hear me. I love you. But what he does every time is he puts the dirty laundry next to the hamper. It's never in the hamper. Sometimes even makes it on the hamper. It's always next to the hamper. But if I don't say anything to him about why I value that, why it needs to be in there, he's never going to be able to understand why he needs to do that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I hold back is because there's so many other things that he does well that I'm like, I don't want to complain. But by the fifth and sixth time I see the damn laundry next to the hamper, I blow up at him. And that's typically what we do as leaders. We don't communicate what we need the team to do differently. We think, oh, they're doing all these other things. They're showing up to work. And thank goodness, because the turnover is crazy. So I'm not going to give them a hard time because they keep calling out. But then by the fifth time they do, we snap. Then that person feels some type of way and they're looking for another job.
Because they're like, wait a minute, I don't even know that you're upset about this. Look, this came out of nowhere. It's the pebble in the shoe, right? It's that pebble in the shoe that's like, it's kind of not that annoying right now. I'll wait till I get, and then by the fifth, sixth, seventh walk, you're like, I got to get this pebble out because it's annoying me. It's annoying me, right? So that totally makes sense to me. So let's talk about why team cohesion is so important. Like, what do you feel like if we don't have trust, right, or we are trying to establish trust, how does that impact the whole entire like system? How does the system of the practice, the system of the business? Talk to me about that.
Because what happens next if you don't have trust, the next layer in this model that I talk about often, Patrick Lencioni's model, is around conflict. We're not able then to have healthy conflict. And what healthy conflict looks like is that when you are reviewing maybe some of the key things that you need to either change differently within your practice or things that you want to start doing in your practice, no one's going to challenge you or go into a healthy debate about what it should look like or shouldn't look like in the spirit of finding the best answer or best solution if they don't trust one another. Then they're just coming to work for a paycheck. They don't feel that connected to actually give you or give us insights around what should be different. So team cohesion has to start with trust, so that way then you can have this healthy conflict where they're now a part of the decision making in a way where it's really collaborative and at times feels a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, how do leaders start to build those trust levels with their team? You did talk about one sharing like experiences and connecting that way. What are some other tools that they could use to help say, okay, I need my team to feel like they can trust me and I can trust them so that we can start moving into the space of cohesion?
So one example that we can do is schedule weekly one-on-one sessions. The beauty behind weekly one-on-one sessions, I know a lot of us are like, I don't even know if I can commit to that. It's like saying we can't commit to having downtime with our family. But the
Hmm.
one-on-one weekly session serves two purposes. One, the kicking off of just a connection point. Hey, I wanted just to check in. I want to check in to see how your heart's doing. How are you doing? How's family? How's work? It's really just a nice time to make sure that that person feels seen, that person feels heard, that person feels cared about, because you're asking them in a very intentional way about what's going on in their world. The second piece is making sure that those expectations, those key things that you need to communicate, you have a forum that you're talking to them about it every time. And in that forum, it's coming back from a feedback. What are they doing well? And what are they not doing well? And if you're doing that weekly, it never feels like where did that come from? Why are all of a sudden you telling me that I'm not doing A, B, and C? Well, no, we've been meeting weekly and I've been telling you exactly weekly how I care about you and what's missing.
I love that. One of the things that I try to do in my office is have those weekly checks. So that makes me feel like I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Because I work on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So therefore, I'm like, okay, there's been a lot of days that I haven't got a chance to see the team. So on Tuesday, I'm like, all right, let me start pulling everybody in. How are you doing? What's going on? Because what I realized, especially after the pandemic, was that people had a lot of things that were heavy for them during the pandemic, especially since I have a minority based practice. The Black Lives Matter was a big thing that I would have to sit down and have conversations with because I didn't realize how it was impacting people or people's financial impact, the stresses, the depression, all the things that I didn't even think would be a problem in the office, I saw were becoming a problem. And so having those weekly check-ins to just say, hey, are you good? Like, what's going on? What are some things I could be doing differently was one of the questions that I like asking. So my next question to you is, now as a leader, right, and trying to make sure I'm asking the right questions, what are some of the things that you feel like leaders should be doing or as far as asking questions to their teams? Like, what questions should be asked?
Yeah, I love where you're going with this. And I just want to circle back because what you just shared is powerful. And using Black Lives Matter movement as an example, even in that, those conversations had to be increased, meaning outside of the weekly one-on-one sessions, I'm sure hearing what you just said, you probably had additional times that you
Yeah.
had placed to dedicate to talk about the team, to really dive into how are they feeling, answering any questions they have. And that's what's key about this is that the communication, it starts off weekly, but you have to be open to how do you expand upon it based off whatever unique thing is happening to make sure your team feels like, oh, she really cares. She or he is up leveling how we're connecting based off whatever's happening. So that's
Mm.
one. To answer your question though, is how to ask feedback in a way that's very intentional. Typically, as leaders, what we do is we'll say at the end of a conversation, any feedback you have for me? And for the person the receiving end, it's kind of like a loaded question. They're like, oh, like feedback about this conversation, feedback about the practice, feedback about what.
Okay.
So the question I would or the way to phrase it, I would recommend is, hey, do you have any recommendations on anything I should start doing or stop doing? And just phrasing it that way allows them to go into their bank of, oh, yes, I would love if you would stop doing this because I talk about this with my family all the time. Or I would love if you start this because I keep talking about how we don't have enough coffee in the break room. Like it allows them to think differently and we don't have to go overboard. It's just what would you like me to start doing? Or what would you like me to stop doing?
And for team members that may be listening to this, right? Where is it that they have to allow the trust to come into the place? Because sometimes you can say, oh, I've done all these things, right? I have an open door policy. Like that's one of the things that I used to struggle with. I'm like, you guys can come talk to me about, you come talk to me about anything, like literally, because you talk to me about stuff that doesn't matter in the first place, but the stuff that really you need to talk to me about, you're not talking to me about. So what are some of the things that you encourage the team to feel comfortable with coming to speak about? Because that is a struggle, I think, for doctors. They're like, I'm asking the questions, but I'm not getting the answers.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for team members. And so for anyone that's a team member that's listening, I see you and I know that there are things in your head right now that you're like, how do I have the courage to do it? And the best advice I always have for team members is ask yourself, what's the desired outcome? What's the desired outcome that you have in asking those questions to your manager or to your supervisor? And the reason why I say that is you probably have a laundry list of things that you want to be fixed, whether it's a schedule, whether it's your pay, whether it's engagement, things of that nature. What's the desired outcome? Because typically your leader, there's just like any human, they only have the bandwidth to really hear that one thing or maybe the two things that you need so that they can respond. And that's why when you go into the conversation, you can say, hey, I would like to share some feedback on this one specific thing. Do you have a minute? And just doing it that way, just teeing it up that way with intentionality gives you confidence because you're coming from a place of meaningful conversation and it allows your leader to listen in a completely different way.
Yeah, I wish that team members would do more of that because I think that doctors, especially, people don't realize like they're human too, right? So we make
Yes.
mistakes. Our sight is limited based off of all of the things that are going on, and some of the bigger moments that I've always had in my career was just telling the team like, I know you thought that that was something that I did intentionally, but to be honest, like I had 10 things coming at me that day, so I don't even remember that moment. But let's have a conversation about that because my intention or my goal is never to offend or harm. Big picture wise, I want the practice to run successfully. And so I want to have that conversation. I want to have that dialogue and give me the grace, like give me grace too, just like I have to give you grace. And so teams, I really hope that you guys are becoming more confident and more courageous and having conversations and understanding that your doctors probably also want to have that dialogue as well. Now,
I think,
oh, go ahead. No, go, please go.
I was going to say that that's what I think we forget to acknowledge is that we're all human and your leader, your doctor, your person that's overseeing your role, they do care. We take all those things home with us every single
Yes.
night, but we sometimes don't have line of sight to the things that team members are venting at home about, which is why asking yourself what the desired outcome is of you having that conversation and then having the courage to say it it's gonna create a ripple effect of the things that are going to happen in a good way for the both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I charge doctors to do is that for me, when I was talking about that struggle at the beginning where I didn't know if I'm sharing too much or if I'm not sharing enough or my leadership styles weren't really developed, right? I think that a lot of times when people get a degree, and I wrote this on a thread that was like, just because you have a title does not mean that you're entitled. I mean, like we have this arrogance about us when we get this degree or this diploma that says now you're this person. And what I realized for myself is that wait a minute, like I've got to lead people, and because I don't know how to lead people just because I got this degree, let me spend some time actually developing leadership styles. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of people get the role. And this is not just in dentistry, this is in general. I see a lot of people, we could say even political officers, like we see a lot of people get the title, get the elected for the role, but they don't know how to lead. Or when they're leading, it's from a very, very interesting space. So can you talk to us about how to develop those leadership skills?
Yeah, and I guess I want to be real for a minute too, because as we're sharing some of these great tips and tricks, I want to make sure that I also just acknowledge that there's some bad leaders out there. I mean, you gave me permission
Period.
to be like this. There's some jerks out there. And on both fronts, there are some bad leaders and there's some bad team members. And I share that because I truly believe in my heart that people don't leave an organization because of a better pay opportunity. They leave an organization because the lack of connection they had either with their supervisor or with the people that they have on their team. So I share this because from a leader perspective, so a doctor perspective, one of the things that if you're starting to see a lot of turnover on your team, you have to look in the mirror and have that hard look to be like, wait a minute, am I truly showing up in a way that's making people feel seen? Or am I being an ass?
Yeah.
Am I being a jerk because I'm trying to drive the bottom? I'm trying to get this additional income coming in. I'm trying to drive the R. Like, what are you doing there? Because I guarantee you, if you do that, you're going to have a moment of, I have not been slowing down.
Mm.
I have been on my phone while someone's having a one-on-one with me, multitasking. I've been doing all these things not to show that I care. And team members, you're probably doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You're only focusing on all the things that are not working well versus practicing the gratitude of what is working well.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you right now, no matter where you go, there's going to be shit.
Yeah.
But are you at least being able to navigate through that in a way that you're like, well, wait a minute, what am I really upset about?
Yeah.
And did I give my boss the opportunity to know what I'm upset about? Because if you didn't, then that's on you as a team member.
I agree. I think that doctors have to take a look closer. I always say it's on me. So if something is failing, it's on me. And no matter, did I train enough? Did I have enough conversations? And then the other part that I think about is that it's one thing to take advantage of people, right? It's like that's one of the things that I think we feel at. But there's another thing to say that I have accountability, or I'm looking introspectively to see what is my role in this. Like if this team is imploding, what did I do? Did I solve this problem? Did I make this problem worse? And then another thing that I think that enough doctors and teams don't do is reflection on, after you leave the situation, what could you have done differently? You said the shit's gonna follow you regardless. So it's like, okay, we're gonna have one set of problems over here. That wasn't the set of problems over here. So it's not necessarily the problems that you're running away from, but like introspectively, are we growing? Are we becoming better because of it? So I think you're hitting it right on the head.
Yeah. I actually was talking to a leader the other day and having a candid conversation. And they were saying to me, hey, you know what's interesting? I had a team member come to me the other day and they were like, you know what? Every month you keep sending me this gift card. Every single month you send me this gift card to Amazon and you're telling me that I'm doing a great job. And it doesn't make me feel good. And this leader was so taken back because in their mind, they're being intentional.
Yeah.
They're recognizing the team. They're giving them this gift card. So the manager was like, hey, can you explain? Like, give me more context. They were like, well, two things. I actually don't like shopping at Amazon.
Who
and
does
you haven't
that?
actually told me.
Send me
And
the
you
gift
haven't
card.
actually told me what I'm doing great. I just get this generic gift card that says, great job this month. Here's a gift card to a location I don't shop at.
Wow.
So I share that because sometimes we, even as leaders, we are doing things, thinking we're doing the right thing, but we fail to do the one thing. Ask the team what they want.
I love that.
And team members, you owe it to the leader to then respond to what you want.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we incorporate in our practice is a celebration survey, which is like, let me know what you need to do. Like at $25, what makes you feel great? At $50, what is that? And you'd be surprised about the feedback. And I learned that the hard way. I would be giving out, oh my gosh, girl, I would be giving out free trips to New York. Oh my God, really? Like stuff that I'm interested in. I'm like, you want a trip to New York? Here's a Southwest gift card. And why I thought that was continually motivating my team, I wasn't getting any more productivity. Then I decided, well, why don't I actually ask the questions about where do the teams feel celebrated? And this wonderful book called Love Languages somehow appeared, because the work book. Right. And I said, I always say, shout out to my first marriage. I wish that I would have learned about that. Because the reality is that I did not know anything about that. And then reading it, I'm like, oh, okay, girl. I see see what you did wrong there, or I see what he did wrong, right? But learning that actually was a thing in the workplace too, love languages in workplace. So then I started paying attention to, oh, she really likes words. It's not necessarily the acts of service per se, but she wants me to say, girl, you crushed that today. Great job there. That has been something that has been eye-opening to me as a leader to start now asking the questions. And as I'm developing and growing leaders on my team, the first question I ask is, do you know what makes them excited? Do you understand? Because it's different for everybody, right?
So different. I love that you're bringing up that book because it's such a good book. If you guys have not read it, I would highly recommend it. It's worth it for relationships and in work. But using that example with the leader, that was her thing, was affirmation. So just saying good job wasn't enough for her affirmation to be felt. She needed to have the description. I'm a words of affirmation too. So when my husband's like, oh, you look good tonight, I'm like, but like what looks good?
But like what looks good?
Like, are you noticing I'm dropping a few? Like, I want the detail. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, and that's what's key. And I want to make sure I don't give shade out there. We're all busy, but it's mind-boggling to me sometimes how small these things are that go such a long way if we just slow down in order to speed up.
So for the people that don't know, because I've asked this question too, and maybe you can help me, for the team members or the leaders that don't know what actually makes them motivated or inspired, and you ask them the question, well, how do you need to be loved, right? And they don't give you anything. How do you proceed then?
Yeah, I think you could say things like, help me understand what the silence means, or help me understand when you're not saying anything. I feel, and you always would use the word I. You never make it about, like, don't put it on them, like you statements. I feel that if you're not sharing something, there must be something else going on that I don't have line of sight to. Would you feel comfortable
You keep
sharing
going
more?
though. Yeah. So start back again. Like I don't have because the light went out for some reason. Go ahead.
So you want to focus on using I statements versus you statements. I feel you not providing me insights on what you want to be recognized by or how is deeper rooted in something else. And I feel that if I don't know it, I can't help you. Would you mind spending a few minutes with me, maybe just sharing some more of like what's happening in the workspace? Because if team members are turning down, and I would love for team members to drop a review or a comment about this if they would agree, if they're not sharing how they want to be recognized, if they're not providing you feedback, they're telling you that they're not happy. They are telling you that there is a disconnect, and they are probably yearning for you to slow down, pull them aside. This is where that weekly one-on-one is not in the office. This weekly one-on-one is probably at a lunch place, somewhere where it's outside of the office doors, to be like, I want to know more. I see you, I value you, and I know something's up. And I would love to hear from you on what that is.
I agree with that. One of the things that's been going on in my office is that nothing bad from the team perspective as far as the patients, but everybody apparently seems to have something personally going on. And so I have a younger doctor that's in my office, and she's like, I really don't know. The team's energy is low. And I'm like, okay, well, let's come up with something. Let's create an event. So I'm like, let's do Wine Down Wednesday. And she's like, what's that? And I'm like, we're going to bring in different bottles of wine, and they're going to have cheese, and we're not going to talk about teeth at all. I don't want to hear anybody talk about a patient. I don't want to hear anybody talk about teeth. I want us to kiki. I want us to laugh. I want us to put on all kinds of old school jams and just dance it out. Why is that important? Well, you've got to, as a leader, understand the temperament of your team as well. And so it's so important when I see that the team is like starting to trickle down. I don't want to try to bring them up when they're already on the floor down. I'm like, I had to bring you guys up where I can get the momentum. And then the other thing that I thought was really great this week that I did was the individuals who I know I've poured energy and effort to. And now I have been making deposits to that bank. But baby, now we need a withdrawal. So honey, let's talk about this, because I know you have things going on personally in your life, but I expect great things from you because I've been pouring great things into you. And do you expect that of yourself? So I charged them with the expectation of, listen, I don't think you're just special because you're here. I think you're special because you are special. Now I've been pouring all these seeds, and I literally say this, I have made all the deposits that I personally know how to. Now it is time for me to make this withdrawal. I am expecting for you to rise to the greatness that I know you're called to do. And surprisingly, that really worked this week for me, which was a great, I had never really, how do I say it? I had never really thought about like, okay, I'm putting all this energy and effort into my team, but it is their responsibility to show up, even in the areas where sometimes they don't feel like it. For doctors that are maybe struggling on like, okay, can I do that? Can I say that? What are some advice that you would give to them?
So before I share advice, quick question for you. Were you using the phrase deposit and withdraw to your team?
Yes.
Okay, because that's the advice I would give to leaders. I just want to make sure
Really?
that
I didn't even know
it would be
that.
here's why. That goes back to that expectation piece I was talking about at the beginning. The more that you're saying those phrases, the more that you're using that terminology, the more that you're giving them a visual, and it becomes part of your brand. You're depositing in them, and every time you do, they're looking at it as cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Now it's time to withdraw. I need to show up. I had a leader who I respected so much. Her phrase was, I want to make sure that we're always working shoulder to shoulder. And you know what? I just got goosebumps because that's how real it is.
Wow.
Every every time I noticed the morale was down, I was like, how am I lifting her up shoulder to shoulder to pick the team up
I love
versus
that.
leaning on her? We need to be shoulder to shoulder. So it doesn't have to be so complicated. You have to think of the 10 or 12 things. Just having that simple phrase creates this unity that people are going to start to show up. And the people that don't, that's okay. That goes back to my statement before. They were not meant to be a part of your team. They were not connected to you, and potentially you were not connected to them. And that's okay. But if you know you're showing up as a leader and you're establishing this in a way that you know you're pouring yourself into them, deposit, and they're not withdrawing, then we have to walk through that. But if they are withdrawing, you have to keep positive reinforcement. Like, I'm so glad that you withdrew this today because there were 2 people that called out and you showed up. Guess what? In addition to Wind Down Wednesday, I got you. I got a little gift coming to your house that I know that you wanted, and it's because of A, B, and C.
I love that. And what I will make sure I do is honor those people that did literally take what I said as far as the positive, which you just said made me feel like, okay, you know what? When I get done with this podcast, I'm going to send the message and say, girl, you did. I got my withdrawal today. The bank is full. I feel happy. Thank you. And I think you feel better as well. I mean, I'm crazy in my office, which is funny. Like, I'm literally like, okay, so I see what you're eating, and that's not okay. You know why? Because you're going to be lethargic when you come back from lunch. So they hate me, but I'm like, is that a Chick-fil-A bag? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, show me what's in that Chick-fil-A bag. And they're like, it's a salad. And I'm like, all right, you can pass. Because my door is right by the exit. So they're walking back. And I'm like, what do you have? And the reason why I do that, guys, or the reason why I'm so vested in my team being healthy or being mindful of what they're eating is that certain foods also drain you down too. So if you're already feeling low, when I eat some cheeseburger, which I haven't had in a long time, oh my God, I miss a cheeseburger. But if I ate a cheeseburger, right, and I know I'm like, I already feel heavy, it makes me feel already, I don't feel great. And then I'm feeling even lower. So I'm like, we don't have time right now. I just told you I needed withdrawals, so I need you to stop eating this crazy food because I need you to be your best self possible. And I'm just grateful to the team members that actually really, really stepped up. For me, I'm speaking about my team this week, but thank you for this advice as well because this is important. So then I go back to the leaders, right? So let's talk about that. I reiterate on my show over and over again the importance of self-care, right? Because I get up at 4:30 in the morning, which is wild to some, but I get up that early because I'm like, I am already empty. I don't have a full cup, but my battery is at least charged. But I know how much I have to do before I get into that office. So I am literally in the gym. I'm kicking butt. I'm listening to music. A lady today came to me in the gym. She said, girl, what are you listening to? Because I'm running sprints. And I'm like,
You're doing your thing.
I'm doing my thing because I'm in my zone. More so because I know, like, if I'm doing a podcast today and we have 3 interviews, I want to give my best foot forward. And the only way that I can do that is if I got a full cup. What I notice a lot of times with leaders, especially in my industry, is that they're confused on why their days aren't so great. They're confused on why they feel so lethargic. And they're also confused about their team. What it seems to be a problem is that they don't understand that it starts with the head. So what are some things that you can specifically give to leadership behavior styles that are really impacting the team's cohesion?
Yeah, that centers around like how you're talking about how you take care of your health and you wake up at 4:30 in the morning, which I also wake up at 4:30 in the
Shout out
morning.
to the
So
4:30
not judging
crew,
you. I'm
right?
very
You know,
for you.
Michelle
I'm very
Obama's with us as well, girl. Michelle Obama's
there
with
we
us
go.
at 4:30.
There we go. There we go. Right. And what you will learn about even Michelle Obama and us, like what's key is what's the thing that you're doing to also like fill up your mind. So I am very big on, I'm at least reading some type of article once a week. I'm reading some type of book once a week. What am I doing to make sure that I am giving myself some additional tools to help me build my team? There are so many team related books out there. There are so many different podcasts that are out there. And I'm not saying that you need to, I think when people hear me say that, they're like, I don't know if I have time. I'm talking about 10 minutes. How are you dedicating 10 minutes Monday through Friday to this specific topic? And you're just learning. Because I guarantee you, just like working out, when you have additional things that you can do differently for that workout routine, you feel more confident. You feel more excited about the workout. Same thing's going to apply to your team. If you have more tools that you can now play around with to build your team up, to make them cohesive, you're going to be more excited. When we don't fill our brain up that way, we get defeated because we're like, how come our team is not operating, and we don't know what else to do? We just do nothing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't serve us either.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I would do during the pandemic was I would research how to inspire teams in uninspired times. And I think that that was one of the things that really helped me, right? Like change the whole trajectory, because I'm like, all right, this is something that I don't understand and I don't know. So we're in a world full of so much information that we can get access to at our fingertips, but sometimes we don't take advantage of it. So my other philosophy, and I get this from Zig Ziglar, is the I don't know if you've heard about this, I'm sure you have, the automobile MBA, which is literally saying, hey, in your commute to work, right, learn something. If it's a podcast, we have time, we just choose not to do anything different with our time.
Use it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's what I rock with. So on the way here, I'm like listening to a book, because I'm like, all right, I jammed out at the gym. I can't learn at the gym. I got to do like stuff that's like mind numbing, just like music that's cussing me out, telling me that I ain't nothing, to go like work out harder, right? Like that's what I need. That's apparently my jam, right? But whatever it is for you, I agree with you. 10 minutes. You need to think about like force feeding your brain, because that also is not something that's really common, right? So you have to tell yourself, all right, I'm going to listen to something 10 minutes. And then it becomes something where it's like water. You're thirsty for it. You just want to continue to learn. So one of the other questions I have then is that, how can leaders effectively communicate expectations to their team goals to enhance the cohesion? Because maybe the articulation of the goals is lost in translation.
Yeah, I love this question. I get it often with leaders that are like, I just feel like no one's bought into the vision and I'm constantly repeating myself. And I'm like, all right, well, let's flip it. How do we have fun with how we talk about our priorities? What if we had a different way of bringing the team together? So just imagine what it would look like. Imagine this. You're in a different room. Maybe it's at a hotel that you rented out a little spot because you want to take care of the team. And you're like, you know what? We're going to whiteboard what some of our objectives are for the year. And I call it the top priority exercise. And everyone gets a different color. If you're not creative like this, just hear me out for a second and then we can judge after. But like, what the goal is, how do you have each person put on their wall, on their Post-it, what their top priority is? And you allow everyone an opportunity to really voice why they believe that's the top priority. And you're able to collectively align on, hey, what I'm hearing us all say is this. So actually the top priority, the bucket is called this. And don't worry, Lisa, we're still going to be able to hit the thing that you talked about because it still falls under this bucket, but in this way, but we probably have to push it out a couple of months. It allows you to bring the team together in a different way. And when you change up the dynamic and how you're communicating that vision, the team is going to respond because they're going to be like, we got color pens. We got Post-its, that we're at a different location. And when we switch things up like that, we show up differently because we know that we're doing something different. And typically people are like, well, how often do you do it? I would say once a quarter. If you can't do once a quarter, at least try it twice a year. And it's just a really great way to bring the team together in a fun way to be like, what's our top priority? It's also a great way to see if the team says something. If everyone says something completely different, then it allows you a good moment to get crystal clear that, oh, we were off.
Right.
We were off. Let's actually spend some time regrouping.
Yeah. And I think that when you're talking about planning that out, what I hear people are going to say, in my back of my mind, I heard Dennis say, well, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, you actually don't have time not to do that. You need to actually schedule that time, right? And so one of the things that I always am talking to people about as well is like, how far are we mapping out our year, right? So I start in October with planning out what we need to do for the next year. Put that into your planner. So she's saying that twice a year that should happen. Well, if you could do it every quarter, that'd be wonderful. And then if you could do it every other month, that'd be wonderful. You're not going to miss out on training the team or getting them on the same page more. If anything, you're going to make sure that the target is like achievable and everybody's on the same page with hitting the target, right?
Yeah, and I am forgetting the name of the author, but I'm reading this really good book, which goes back to our 10-minute exercise in the morning, called The Power of Moments. And the reason why I bring that up at the very beginning of the podcast, you said that we're living in this different time. Ever since post-COVID, so many individuals are in the online space, or they're trying to have the second job in the online space. And I commend them because I'm doing the same thing. Right. We're all doing that thing, but it's really hard to bring the team together. And the whole philosophy of this book is centered around, in this evolving time, in this changing time, how do you create moments in the areas that you want to make a difference? So when we continue to have conversations in a sterile Zoom call and talking about the priorities for the next 3 months, or bring everyone in and cram them into your office to talk about it, and we're not creating a moment, we're not creating something that's memorable, the team won't be bought in or remember what you even talked about, because we didn't change up the experience. We're all, as human beings, current state, thriving off something different. Which is why some of us watch reality TV shows, because we're all like in like, what else is everyone else doing? Like, I need something that's different. So I'll pause there. Did that resonate?
I'm sorry, what happened?
I said, did that resonate? I said, I would pause there. Did that resonate?
Oh, I thought you paused because you did cough. And I was like, what? I was
That
like,
was an awkward transition. That was an awkward transition.
Yeah, I was like,
I'll pause
she's about
to jump in.
No. I got it. No, you could keep going, because I was like, yes. I thought you were about to cough, and I was like, okay. But okay,
Oh, no.
So let's pick it back up. No, I thought I think that absolutely it resonates. One of the things that you just said that stood out to me was how do you create a different space in creating moments? So back to my team again, with the team morale kind of being low, not because of the office, but because of their personal things. I said, well, let's do wind down Wednesday and let's do it at the office, like after hours close. And the girls told me, which I thought was great feedback, we don't want to be here though, Doc. We want you to take us somewhere else. And I was like,
there you go.
Right.
There you go.
It's creating
because
a space.
You're creating something special.
Yeah.
You're creating a moment. And now they're telling you the moment can't be here though. The moment needs to be there still with all of us.
Yes.
But somewhere else. And we're yearning for that. We spend so much time together in these four walls. How do we go somewhere else? If you want to talk about vision, if you want to talk about strategy, switch it up every once in a while. It becomes memorable. It becomes that. Remember that time when Dr. Simone took us out to that one place? It was beautiful. The flowers, and we all had a deeper connection. Do you remember when Lisa was crying? Like, it changes the dynamic.
Yeah. And I think that you actually see more productivity from your teams when you get the opportunity to do that, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So doctors, when you guys are kind of like really like, oh my God, the budget doesn't allow it. I think that the budget does not allow for it. Right. So one of the things that I think is important, especially when you're forecasting your numbers or creating your budget for the year, put team builders in there. You have to put team builders in there. And like this one is a one-off, right? But I'm like, you know what? It's worth my team to invest $150, $200. If they just want cocktails, just to have a drink, not get drunk, but have a drink, I'm here for it. Why? I see it pay itself back 1,000-fold when my patients are loved on, when my team is super happy, because as you guys can already tell from my energy, we are not having boring work days. I can't tolerate it. I got to be there. It's going to be on and popping. Like, I want to have fun. We got Alexa's pumping in the room. I'm like, what jams are we listening to? Funny story, right? I had a patient yesterday, and I don't know why I want to sex you up came up, but it happened to be that. And she said, I'm literally in her mouth doing a crown. And she said, girl, I lost my virginity to that song. And I'm just literally dying. But what kind of vibe is that? And now she doesn't remember that we're doing a crown on her tooth. She's literally transporting herself back.
In a moment.
Creating that moment. So it was something small. Girl, I love this. This conversation just went full circle. That one moment, and she came out giving me a hug. I said, girl, you better go play that song for your husband tonight. And it was just a great, great energy. But my assistant is cracking up. The team is like, what is Dr. Ellis doing back there? So they're coming to see why I'm laughing. And the whole vibe of the office, the energy is on a different level, much different than it was when we first started the day. Doctors, that's your responsibility. It's to create those moments, not only for your patients, but for your team, because they help to continue to bring the elevation and the fun back to the practice, right? One of the other questions I have for you is, what role does active listening to your team? Let's break that down. What is even active listening, right?
Yeah, active listening. So what's wild is when you think about nonverbal cues, it's like 60% of what people take away. So active listening is such a key thing when you truly just pause and listen. There's an exercise that I do with my team when I'm really trying to drive this home, where I want you to imagine it, where it's one person sharing their vacation story. So they're sharing a time that they took a vacation with their family, and the other person is completely ignoring them. And we do it for about 30 seconds to really hone in on how did it make you feel as you're telling this really vulnerable story and this person is completely ignoring you. Yes, I told them to ignore you, but how did it feel? And 9 out of 10 times they say exactly what we're thinking, which is, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel valued, I didn't feel heard. And I go, let's switch it now into normal day-to-day practice. Someone comes into your office and they, as a leader, they're telling you, hey, I have these schedule issues. And then you start typing on your laptop. And then they're like, and I'm just really like, my kids are just, they're stressing me out. I'm so exhausted. Then you get a text from your spouse or your partner, and you're starting to look at your phone. How do you think that person on the other end is feeling? We
Wow.
need to, so we need to, active listening is twofold to me. When people are, when our team is coming to us about something, it is earth shattering to them. We need to make sure that we are closing our laptop, we are moving our phone to the furthest part of the table from us, and we are just sitting there and we are just listening. And if we're asking questions, we're asking questions from a place of, tell me more, help me understand. What are you looking for? The goal is not to solve it. The goal is just to really better understand what they need. And I think 9 to 10 times, I've been guilty of it too. We're doing all these other things because we think we're still being present. So I'll stop there to see how that
Yeah, and
lands.
I think that that's so. One thing that made me think about this, well, then the people that, let's say, for instance, you're being an active listener, right? But they're sharing too much, or the story is going too long, or there's no separation of like, hey, I've got to do this job. And although I want to be a listening ear as a leader, I'm not a counselor. Like, I don't know how to fix this problem. Where are the boundaries being set there?
Yeah, this is such a good one. And why I want to make sure, I'm glad that you asked it, because I think sometimes we even overcomplicate how the conversation should look.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, these individuals that are working for us, they're our family. They're a second family, right? They're a second family in the way that we take care of them, the way that we provide for them, provide to them, and et cetera. It is okay in that conversation to say, hey, I might interrupt you sometimes just because I want to make sure that I'm hearing what it is that you want me to take away. Because I can tell you right now, if my husband were to come in here and tell a long story, I have no shame to be like, honey, get to the point. Get to the point. I wouldn't say that to my team member in that way.
Right.
But why don't we have a similar type of format to be like, hey, I know this is heavy and I know you want to give me a lot of details. I actually want to make sure that I'm listening. I have 5 more minutes. We can schedule some additional time, or you can tell me what's the key thing you want me to hear. And saying it
Mm.
like that, or interrupting and saying I'm interrupting only because I want to make sure I hear, is okay, because you're communicating that you're not getting what you need. That's not being mean. That's better than your face expression slowly changing as you're like, I have no idea what they're saying because I'm struggling with keeping up. I'm struggling with paying attention.
Gosh, you are dropping so many things that I'm literally on my seat like, I need to do this immediately, because I think about that. I'm in spaces a lot of times where I'm like, all right, I want to hear you. I definitely want to help, but they just came to me and told me that this is a patient in room 5. I got 1,000 emails that are literally going here, and this is something that isn't necessarily work related, but I want to hear you. I want you to feel still seen. But in the same back of my mind, I'm like, I got to do a lot of things. So one things I'm definitely taking away from is being present, actively listening. Simone, you're going to actively listen. You're going to ask them specifically, what do you want them to take away? What do you want me to receive here? Like, how do you want me to help and be an assistance? And then also, I think another thing that I would like to add is, for me, I didn't realize I was getting anxiety in my office because what was happening was the amount of input, the impact that we were the inputs that were happening were overwhelming. And I didn't know that. So this is before I even knew what anxiety was. I was just like, my brain feels like it's about to go like crazy because I'm getting interrupted like 10,000 times. And I'm like, I don't know. Then I realized, oh my God, I'm not even supposed to be processing information this fast. Like, my brain is like, girl, stop. But I didn't know that. So what I had to start understanding is, oh my God, like, I got to put some boundaries in place. So now I put a sign up sheet outside my door to say, hey, like, I want to get to your problem, But I got to make sure I got the right time to get to your problem, the first thing, right? And then the second thing I need to make sure that I do is that I got to see is it a priority or not. And what that did to me so the active listening part is that it allowed me to be able to actively listen at a time that I could really give the energy and effort to. I probably got to go back and reiterate that to my team, because what I would tell them is, you may have only interrupted me 4 times today and you feel like that's been great. There is 15 of y'all. So whatever that is times 4 is the amount of interruptions. And God forbid that there's thoughts that I actually have in my own head that I got to deal with. On top of, there are patients that have thoughts as well. So now I'm in this whole whirlwind of like, I can't process all this information. And that's not fair to me. That is why I think we do see a lot of dentists that are just going like, that are having psychotic or nervous breaks because of the fact that we are asking our brains to comprehend and compute way too much. But whose responsibility is that for me to say, it's my responsibility to say, all right, I'm on information overload. So like, let's go ahead and prioritize this first. Then I can get back to this. And then I will follow through with this when times are also conducive to me. Like, and doctors, I don't want you to feel, like, I think I felt guilt and shame about that at the very beginning when I was realizing like I can't process all this. And now I'm like, no, like I just can't. I don't have the brain capacity to do that. Right.
I hope your team tells you often how great of a leader you are, because the examples that you are sharing right now are so meaningful and intentional. And I can tell you, there are a lot of leaders and doctors that are not doing even a fourth of what you're sharing today. The fact that you have a sign up sheet outside your door of sign up for key times. I know sometimes doctors and leaders may be thinking, well, is that too bold? Does that feel right? That's actually spot on. That's going back to setting expectations. I'm doing this to make sure that you know that when you sign up for that time, I'm present, I'm there with you. And I'm also being there for myself on the things I need to do behind the closed doors when I'm not talking to the team. So the fact that you are very intentional, wind down Wednesday, like these things are huge, and you're creating moments for your team. So I just wanted to throw that out there and give you some intentional recognition, because on a topic that is so deep, I just want to make sure you're seen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think the reason why I'm that way is because I wasn't a good leader, right? And so I think that the ego came out. It was just like, listen, like you're not good at this. And docs, it's okay to not be good at something. It's, I think, a very problematic way to be if you feel like you're supposed to be great at everything and you haven't had the tools. I remember reading a great book that talked about money management as an example. And it's like, a lot of people that can't manage money because they're never taught the tools on how to manage money, right? And it's the expectation of like, well, wait a minute. When you got out the womb, you did not know how to run. You had to learn how to crawl, and then you had to learn how to walk, and then you could run. And so I started applying that in so many areas of my life. And I think that the other thing that I really take home, or I really try to be, is I'm a forever student. So in the areas that I'm weak, I listen to my team to see, okay, I'm not hitting on that. And if I'm not, then let me go and try to not take it offensively, take the ego out of it. How can I show up better? One of my employees said, well, I don't necessarily see the immediate results of that. And I said, that's so sad that you think that you should see it immediately, right? Don't you think that these lessons that I'm teaching you, or the things that you're learning now, you can use for whatever aspect of your life? It doesn't have to just be work related. I mean, when you learn love languages, right? Like, I can apply that in any space. When I learned about Colby, which I'm sure you know about as well, the modes of operation, I was like, oh my God, like that makes so much sense as far as I'm an extreme quick start. For anybody that needs to know that, that means that my brain is like, we're going to the moon today. I don't know how we're getting there, but it is literally go to the moon.
It's happening.
It's happening. I don't care how we're going to do it, but like that's happening. And what I didn't realize indirectly I was doing was I was hiring fact finders all around me, because I needed people to say, all right, doc, so you want to go to the moon today. That's wonderful. So what gas are we going to use? What vehicle are we going to use? How are we going to get there? How do you expect for it? What date, what time are we going to leave? All the details that I completely miss. But that was me getting rid of my ego. That was me understanding where I was weak at, and then starting to do the exploration. And so I think it's really important that people start to do that work. We just had a gentleman that talked about the dark work, which I'm excited to learn more about. What are the things that I'm not really great at, and how do I continue to get better at them? When you're talking from a last standpoint for doctors or anybody that's trying to build the team, what are the 3 takeaways that you want them to know in order to really build cohesion that is necessary and critical for their success?
The very first one goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning, which is building trust and sharing vulnerability from whatever feels comfortable for you. You as a doctor, you as a leader, you set the tone for how your team is going to show up. So being vulnerable is going to be key. The second piece is communication. There is nothing wrong with sharing what your expectations are, but if you can get creative with having those key words that are going to be tied back to an analogy, like we started with Dr. Ellis, which was deposit and withdraw or shoulder to shoulder, being able to communicate upfront to your team what those expectations are, your team will follow you. And the last piece, I think you summed it up nicely, which is if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh no, I think I'm failing, let the ego go. The fact that you can acknowledge that something needs to change is actually confirming that you're a strong leader. It's confirming that you're a strong doctor because you're creating awareness, but now go do something with it.
Lisa, I want to tell you how much this has transformed my life. I'm going to say this off the camera, but like, girl, I want to be your friend. Like, I'm not joking. Like, it was such. One, I enjoyed this conversation because it really resonated with me, but the way you delivered it was super great. I want people to be able to follow you and even utilize your services in their businesses. So can you tell me a little bit of where we can find you, what services that you offer, because this touched my spirit. Like, this is deep in my soul. Like, I can go and immediately apply these things to make my practice be more successful.
Well, thank you for that. So first place that you can find me is over on Instagram at the Corporate Side Hustler. That is where I hang out most of the time. And then my services are in 2 buckets, one-on-one leadership coaching. So this is where we dive into how you can be the best doctor, how you can be the best leader with your team in a one-on-one container. Or 2, I actually fly out to your team and help build that cohesion and a framework that's customized to your environment to make sure that team is able to show up in a way that they feel seen. So those are the 2 pieces. Reach out to me. And yeah, I feel the same way about you. I'm so grateful. This is closer to the end of our day, and it feels like a cup of coffee. Like I feel like I'm energized to keep going. So thank you.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, please make sure you follow her. She is phenomenal. I already know. I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, okay, I have a leadership class coming up. We need this speaker to come here to mobilize people. It was just great. It was good food for the soul. Docs, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to her because she's done the work. Clearly, she's doing the work, and clearly she will make sure that you will do the work to be successful. This is Beyond the Chair. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and please give us feedback. We want to know what your thoughts are, how we can do to make the show better, and continue to promote great content. So, guys, thank you so much.